One fateful night in August 1944, a young American pilot prepared for a mission that would fundamentally alter the course of modern history. As he climbed into the cockpit of his modified B-24 bomber, he had no idea that his actions would trigger a cascade of events that would reshape American politics for decades to come. This is the story of Operation Aphrodite, a forgotten World War II disaster with consequences that continue to reverberate through our timeline, a perfect example of what we now call the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is a concept from chaos theory suggesting that small, seemingly insignificant events can produce enormous, unpredictable consequences elsewhere in the system. The classic example is a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil, causing a tornado in Texas. While that specific scenario is metaphorical, the principle applies dramatically to human history. Nowhere is this more evident than in the story I'm about to tell you. It was August 12, 1944. World War II had been raging for nearly 5 years. The Allies were gaining momentum, but Nazi Germany remained a formidable enemy, particularly with their deployment of new vengeance weapons. The V-1 flying bombs and V-2 rockets that rained terror on London and southern England. In response, Allied military planners devised increasingly desperate and innovative strategies to neutralize these threats. Enter Operation Aphrodite, one of the most unusual and dangerous missions of the entire war. The concept was simple yet terrifying. Take aging B-17 and B-24 bombers, strip them of all unnecessary weight, pack them with explosives, literally turning them into massive flying bombs, and crash them directly into heavily fortified German targets. The catch? Human pilots were still needed to get these flying bombs airborne and on course toward their targets before bailing out. On that August evening, a 29-year-old pilot named Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., Joe to his friends and family, walked across the airfield at RAF First Field in Norfolk, England. As the eldest son of Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., a wealthy businessman and former U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom, Joe Jr. had been groomed from birth for political greatness. His father made no secret of his ambition to see his son become the first Catholic president of the United States. Joe had already completed his required combat missions in the European theater. With 25 missions under his belt, he could have returned home to safety, to begin what everyone expected would be a meteoric political career. Instead, he volunteered for Operation Aphrodite. Why would someone with such prospects ahead of him choose one of the most dangerous missions available? The answer lies partly in the intense competition within the Kennedy family. Joe's younger brother John, known to the world later as JFK, had already become something of a war hero after the PT-109 incident in 1943, where he had saved his crew after their patrol boat was rammed by a Japanese destroyer. The Kennedy family's culture of competition, instilled by their father, drove Joe to seek his own path to military distinction. If John could be a hero, Joe would be an even greater one. As Joe made his final preparations for the mission, the modified B-24 Liberator bomber designated BQ-8 waited on the runway. This was no ordinary aircraft. Engineers had stripped it of all armor, gun turrets, and non-essential equipment. In their place were over 21,000 pounds of Torpex, an explosive compound 50% more powerful than TNT. The aircraft was essentially a guided missile, with two critical differences. It needed human pilots to get it airborne, and once in flight, it would be controlled remotely by a following aircraft called the Mothership. Accompanying Joe was his co-pilot, Lieutenant Wilford J. Willey. Their task was deceptively straightforward: take off, reach a specified altitude, engage the radio control system that would allow the Mothership to take over, arm the explosives, and then parachute to safety. The unmanned bomber would then be guided to its target, a V-weapon site near Mimoyec, France. As twilight descended over the English countryside, Kennedy and Willey boarded their aircraft. Ground crews watched with a mixture of admiration and dread. Everyone knew the inherent dangers of the mission, yet there was Joe, smiling confidently as he climbed aboard. After a final check of their equipment and a thumbs up to the control tower, they began their takeoff roll. The heavily laden bomber struggled into the air. Following behind was another aircraft carrying the radio control equipment and operators who would take over flying the bomber once Kennedy and Willey bailed out. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. The bomber reached its designated altitude and radio contact between the two aircraft was established. Then at precisely 6:20 p.m., just off the coast of Suffolk, England, a catastrophic electrical malfunction occurred. The 21,000 pounds of Torpex detonated prematurely in a massive explosion that lit up the evening sky. The fireball was so intense it was visible from over 20 miles away. The BQ-8 bomber, along with Kennedy and Willie, was instantly vaporized. There were no remains to recover, no bodies to bury, just a momentary flash that changed history. The technical cause of the disaster was never definitively determined. The most likely explanation was a short circuit in the complex arming system installed for the mission. What is certain is that neither Kennedy nor his co-pilot had time to bail out. In the blink of an eye, the presumptive future president of the United States was gone. In the grand scheme of World War II, the loss of a single bomber and 2 crew members was barely a footnote. Operation Aphrodite itself was ultimately deemed a failure. None of the missions successfully hit their targets, and the program was abandoned after only a few attempts. The V-weapon sites that Kennedy was trying to destroy were eventually neutralized by conventional bombing and the Allied advance across Europe. But the ripple effects of that explosion would fundamentally alter American political history in ways that continue to shape our world today. With Joe Jr.'s death, the Kennedy family's political aspirations shifted to the next son in line, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. While Joe Sr. had always seen political potential in all his sons, it was Joe Jr. who had been meticulously groomed from childhood to pursue the presidency. John, who had been considering a career in journalism or academia, suddenly found himself the repository of his father's unfulfilled ambitions. John F. Kennedy's path to the presidency is well documented. After the war, he entered politics, winning a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1946, then moving to the Senate in 1952. In 1960, he narrowly defeated Richard Nixon to become the 35th President of the United States, fulfilling his father's dream, though not through the son originally intended. Had Joe Kennedy Jr. survived the war, American history would likely have unfolded very differently. Joe was more conservative than John, more in line with his father's political views. He lacked John's chronic health problems, which necessitated the heavy use of medications throughout his presidency. Joe was more outgoing and direct, lacking some of the intellectual complexity that characterized his younger brother. In short, a Joe Kennedy presidency would have been markedly different from the JFK administration we know from history. Consider the implications. Would a President, Joseph Kennedy Jr., have handled the Cuban Missile Crisis the same way John did? Would he have initiated the space program with the same vigor, committing America to reach the moon? Would he have begun the process of civil rights legislation that his brother set in motion? And most provocatively, would he have escalated American involvement in Vietnam as Lyndon Johnson did after JFK's assassination? The assassination itself, that pivotal moment in Dallas on November 22, 1963, would presumably never have happened. Without JFK's assassination, there would have been no transfer of power to Johnson, no Warren Commission, and none of the conspiracy theories that continue to capture the American imagination nearly 6 decades later. The cultural impact of the Kennedy presidency and its tragic end resonates to this day. The idealized Camelot narrative that emerged after JFK's death profoundly influenced American political culture, establishing a template for charismatic leadership that subsequent presidents have tried to emulate. The Kennedy mystique became a powerful force in American politics, helping to propel Robert Kennedy's 1968 presidential campaign and later the political careers of various Kennedy family members. The ripple effects extend even further. Without JFK's assassination, the political trajectory of the 1960s might have been entirely different. The Vietnam War might not have escalated to the same degree. The counterculture movement might have taken a different form. Richard Nixon might never have become president, meaning no Watergate scandal, which fundamentally altered Americans' trust in government. This is the essence of the butterfly effect in history. One event, seemingly isolated, creates ripples that transform everything that follows. The premature detonation of a bomber over the English Channel in 1944 ultimately changed the course of American politics, global geopolitics, and even our cultural consciousness. What makes this story particularly poignant is how random, how utterly contingent this pivotal moment was. Operation Aphrodite was a deeply flawed concept from the beginning. The technical challenges of converting bombers into remote-controlled flying bombs exceeded the capabilities of 1940s technology.